Good evening and welcome, DCPS families, to Parent University. My name is Natalie Treadgold, and I am a member of the Family Engagement team here at DCPS, and I'm so glad that you've joined us for this really important session tonight where we'll be talking about mental health. So how you as a parent can help your child prepare for this year, and what we're doing at DCPS to support our students' mental health going into this transitional year. I'm going to kick us off with a few housekeeping items, and then I'm really excited to introduce you to the experts from the mental health team here at DCPS who will be sharing some great information and answering your questions tonight. So the first thing I want to share is that we do have subtitles available for those who need them. To turn on the subtitles, you can click the gear icon in the bottom right hand of your screen, select caption subtitles, and then the language that you prefer. We also have simultaneous interpretation happening in Spanish. There's a link for that in the announcements here on Teams. So if you do need Spanish interpretation, please head over to that link and you'll be able to participate live. Like I said, we're really excited to answer your questions tonight. So we encourage you to use the Q&A feature on Microsoft Teams Live to ask questions. And then if you see other people's questions that you're interested in hearing the responses to, you can give them a thumbs up. We have a number of folks on the back end of this event who are going to be answering as many questions as we possibly can in the Q&A, and then we'll also pause during the presentation to raise up some questions for our presenters to answer live. We're going to get to as many questions as we possibly can, but just know that the topic that we're going to be most focused on tonight is the mental health questions, since that's the purpose of this event. We do have a couple of community agreements that we like to introduce at the beginning of every Parent University. And the purpose of these agreements is just to ensure that this is a safe space for all of our families. So we want to just assume the best intentions of everyone. Go hard on ideas and not on people. So we're always appreciative and welcoming of feedback. Just make sure that we're being all respectful of each other and sharing ideas in a thoughtful way. And then accepting non-closure. Like I said, we're going to answer as many questions as we can. We know you have a lot of questions, especially related to health and safety and what COVID protocols will look like. So we're going to be responding to as many as we can, but also know that there's more information that's coming out, and encourage you to follow along with our DCPS Reopen Strong website, where information is posted as soon as we have it, and to make sure that you're staying up to date with DCPS on social media and reading the Chancellor's emails. Finally, we just want to say how excited we are to welcome students back into buildings 5 days a week with their teachers. We know that DCPS staff, teachers, principals are really excited to see their students in person, and we're excited to share with you tonight how, anyone that's feeling maybe anxious or nervous about that, or worried about their mental health transitioning into the new year, the supports that are available and in place for those students and their families. So with that said, I'm really excited to turn it over to our wonderful mental health friends. So I'm going to kick it to Nigel Jackson, who is on the mental health team. He's the director of, I can't read the slide, but Nigel, I'll let you introduce yourself. Sure. He's great. That's what I'll say. And I'll let Nigel take it from here. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you for the the ground rules. Thank you for the introduction, and good evening, everybody. And thank you for having us here. I'm Nigel Jackson. I'm the Director of School Mental Health. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Carla Hall, who's the Director of Expansion. And we will be the two members of our team who will be presenting tonight. There are two other members of our leadership team that are not joining us this evening, but tonight it will be Carla Hall and myself. And we're very excited to be here, and we're thankful for the opportunity to work with Parent University and to share as best we can with you, our parents. I did a virtual training last year for the guests that were in my training were from all around the country. There were people from Nevada, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, and it was really the first time that I had done a training where the guests were, from that many different parts of the country. And when we started talking with other clinicians from around the country, the one thing that stood out during our conversation was how vastly different our personnel was in DC than it is around the country. And what I mean by that is we have such a robust commitment to mental health that it's really shocking when you start speaking with people from other parts of the country. There are over 600 trained professionals engaged in the provision of mental health services across DC public schools. I'm going to say that number again. 600. Carla refers to us as an army, and we are, because there's over 600 of us. Leveraging all of these dedicated resources allows DCPS to support students consistent with their particular level of need. School mental health providers offer preventative, targeted, and intensive supports to students based on a public health model. Okay, so DCPS parents were administered a learning from home survey in the spring of 2020, which seems like such a long time ago now, but if you all remember back to the spring of 2020 when we were all adjusting to our new normal at that time, I actually remember at first we thought we were going to be coming back to school in 6 weeks. Do you guys remember that? But that changed and we adjusted the best we could. But parents were administered a survey, a learning from home survey in the spring of 2020, and they were asked how concerned they were about their child's social or emotional well-being during the quarantine. Nearly 47% of those surveyed said they were either somewhat or slightly concerned. They were then asked in which particular areas might they need extra support, and the results were staggering. Parents said they needed extra support in the area of mental and emotional support, almost twice as much as they did for food or employment. Parents also said they needed extra support in the area of mental and emotional support 6 times as much as they did for healthcare. This just lets you know exactly how serious parents have been taking mental health and us as well. So in June of this year, parents were queried yet again on the same matter. They were asked to rank the potential investments in order of priority from most important to least important. The ARP survey results showed that parents ranked academic intervention first. That may not surprise you. Many of us on here are parents as well, and parents ranked academic intervention as the #1 most important priority. Followed closely in second was social emotional learning and mental health support. Social emotional learning and mental health support ranked second, and it was actually tied with COVID-19 health and safety protocol. So that lets you see right there that as parents, we are as concerned about our health and safety protocol as we are the mental health support. And again, this speaks volumes of the emphasis parents have placed on their child's mental health, as well as the emphasis that we've placed on mental health supports. This year, one of our major points of emphasis is the whole child approach. You may have heard this in other parent universities, and it is something that you'll continue to hear throughout this year. But we are really focusing on a whole child approach. And you hear the word whole in the first part of that phrase. And what we mean is that we're acknowledging and responding to the overall learning and development needs and opportunities of students, not just their academic needs. Their social and emotional needs are just as important, equally important as their academic needs. A whole child approach that ignores any aspect of that whole child, like the emotional needs, like perhaps trauma, racialized trauma, gender affirmation, any component of that whole child that is ignored is not truly a whole child approach.
Hey, Nigel, can you please unmute your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. All right. The trauma responsive schools model has been in the making for over a decade. 2 years ago, we actually launched it to prepare school communities to support the social, emotional well-being of all students. The model infuses social emotional learning with academic instruction through the establishment of what we call the 5 non-negotiable healing center practices, which you see here on the slide. And it ensures that every adult in our schools, not just the social worker, not just the school psychologist, not just the counselor, not just the mental health people, but every adult in our schools sets the foundation for safe and inclusive spaces for students to process their feelings. I'm now going to pass it to my colleague, Carla Hall, who's going to take us through the next section of our presentation.
Thanks, Nigel. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here with you tonight. So like Nigel said, the trauma responsive practices he just went over are demonstrated universally. So every staff member, every grade band, every school, those are what really create the fabric in the environments that we want for our students and our staff and families. This slide, however, digs a little deeper and highlights the interventions that our school mental health providers use to support students with a multitude of concerns. It's not only important that you as parents understand who is in your child's school to help support their social and emotional needs, but how they approach that, how they go about it, what tools do they use, what are they trained in, what sort of things are they addressing. This chart lists our evidence-based programming available across the district by grade band and also by level of need. So if you see to the left, Tier 1 refers to universal programming or something that is offered to every student in the school. This happens every classroom. All students are impacted and receive these interventions. Tier 2 programming is short-term and typically delivered in small groups. And Tier 3 programming is how we support our individual students with more intense needs. The DCPS school mental health team, like Nigel said, has invested in programming like this since 2010, and we've added to our mental health providers toolkits every year. We try to add a number of interventions, at least one, but at least one every year so that they're continuing to grow. Next slide, please. So given the last 17 months, we wanted to pull out and highlight some of the programs from the list that are specifically focused on addressing students who have experienced trauma. So in the elementary grades, we have our providers, our mental health providers trained in interventions like Bounce Back, grief trauma intervention for children, which is more like an art-based intervention, and child-centered play therapy. And for our secondary schools, our mental health providers are trained in the cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools, or CBITS, and SPARCS, which is structured psychotherapy for adolescents responding to chronic stress. So a lot of words, but really, really important that you all know that we have tooled our folks, and this was not in response to the pandemic, but something that we've been doing for over a decade. Next slide, please.
What you see on the screen here are some of the signs that may suggest your child is feeling anxious about returning to school. And I want to assure you that it's not just your child. Many of my own colleagues are feeling the very same way and have exhibited similar behaviors. Just as transitioning to learning from home required some adjustment, returning to in-person learning means that students will experience another transition period. Many normal classroom routines will be different as we take precautions to protect the health and safety of students returning. The changes in routine and the transition back to in-person learning may be stressful for some. To weather the adjustment period, here are a few things that we can do. I'm not going to go over each of the ones you see in the slide, but I am going to highlight a few of them. Focus on what your student can control. Remind your student to focus on what they can control in their situation. It offers them a sense of strength, a sense of control on things that they know they don't have to rely or ask anyone else to do. They can follow hand washing, mask wearing, and social distancing protocols at school. You can remind, if your student's an older student, remind them that they're helping to protect their community by following these precautions. We can model grounding techniques. Demonstrate self-soothing during times of calm and use them to help shut off the stress response during periods of upset before attempting to problem solve with your child. So when I say stress response, let me go into that for a second. Many of you may be familiar with like the investigative discovery type of shows on TV. I know some of my colleagues are. Sarah, I know you're a Dateline watcher like me. I know some of you watch Another 48 Hours or 48 Hours or Nightline 2020. And for those of you who watch those, can you imagine those scenes where the person is being interrogated in the interrogation room, and then the detective walks out of the room? He's interrogating him, and then he walks out, or she walks out, and the suspect, if you will, is in the room by himself or herself, and they usually are really uptight, and they're experiencing the onset of stress. And when they do that, they usually start shaking their fingers or tapping their leg, or their leg starts moving. And the reason that happens is because there's chemicals that are being released from the brain that are going into the hands and the legs. You may be familiar with this in terms of fight or flight. That fight, flight, or freeze response is normal when you are experiencing stress. So when you hear me say you can use some self-soothing techniques to shut off the stress response, that's what I'm referring to when I say stress response. We can also promote safety and predictability through routines. You can maintain house rules such as what time your child goes to sleep, what time you guys eat dinner as a family, or other family activities. But that routine is really, really important, particularly when we know it's a time of high anxiety. So I want to stay there for a minute, and I want to continue along the vein of anxiety and how to calm some of that anxiety. When we talked about resilience before, or routines, right? The objective of being resilient, of those relationships and routines, the objective of all of that is to convert a dysregulated brain or an anxious brain into a calm brain. So I want to share a few additional things that are proven to help reduce anxiety. You might not think of these because they're a little unconventional, but I certainly want to share them. The first one is gratitude. You can encourage your child to express gratitude, and this will have a positive effect on their resilience. The second thing that I want to mention is hope. You can also create things to look forward to, because retaining hope is also central to building resilience.
So now we're going to take a look at a couple of videos. We wanted to share these with you. So as a parent of a toddler, of a 2-year-old myself, I really appreciate tangible examples. So we hear the concern, and what do I actually do when this child's in front of me? What do I say? What do I do? What does it sound like when you're trying to support your children when they're feeling that anxiety? So we wanted to share the first example here of a very brief meditation that you can use to model for your students what it could sound like and look like to take a break and practice the grounding method. There's dozens of these similar examples on YouTube. Myself, with my daughter, I use one that is a Sesame Street video where Elmo is singing about how to take a belly breath. So we're going to show the first video to you now.
Take a moment to get clear, with noise vibrating around you. Take a moment to have a seat. Get quiet and ground yourself so that you can hear clearly. Begin to plant your feet firmly into the earth, and from your belly, take a deep, energizing breath in through your nose and slowly out through your mouth. Feel yourself becoming more settled and grounded in mind, body, and spirit.
Awesome. Thank you for taking that minute with me. The second video we're going to show I'm really excited about, and I think really it's an example of grounding in action. We're going to see 2 little boys, 2 little siblings. And this video reminds us that children are not only so resilient, but they really pick up on what adults model and what they teach with repetition. So we're going to highlight a video of one sibling trying to help regulate his younger sibling. Awesome. I hope that made everybody else smile. Again, reminds us how kids pay attention and they learn. And they're so resilient. And I've had moments like that with my daughter where I had to have tried to interrupt a tantrum with just breathe. Just make sure you're breathing. And even our youngest kids really are so looking to us for that sort of support and can really catch on very quickly. Next slide. Wonderful. So mental health support and overall wellness have been really lifted up during the pandemic. And of course, Nigel and I are both biased, but we couldn't be prouder of what we've already had built at DCPS in the area of school mental health before the pandemic started. DCPS employs, like Nigel said, about 500 school-based mental health staff. We have about 120 school psychologists, about 140 school counselors, and over 230 school social workers. All of our social workers are licensed at the clinical level. So very highly trained staff that are our own staff members. These staff members are dedicated to their respective campuses. They don't hop around from campus to campus, or they're only deployed to other schools when there's a crisis that needs additional support, but they are in their buildings, their own teams, and they're ready to support the return and the recovery of our staff and our families and our students. School mental health services, in addition to that, across the city, partnerships have been alive and well in our schools for decades, including we've had a partnership with the Department of Behavioral Health school-based behavioral health program for over 20 years now. Then starting in 2018, the mayor went all in for youth mental health and initiated the school mental health expansion, which is the program that I support. In waves based on need, the expansion provides funding to vetted community-based mental health partners, so local organizations in DC, to place a full-time clinician in each of our buildings, expanding the impact that we're able to have, expanding the services we're able to provide with that one additional full-time clinician. This clinician supplements the work of our own teams as they work to provide services and supports to students, also caregivers. Some of you may have interacted with some of our teams and partners. They do a lot of parent engagement and parent outreach and support, parent cafes, and also school staff. They have supported us a lot and allowed us to really expand what we're able to offer in the area of consistent staff wellness. So not just having a staff wellness day or a staff wellness event, but really taking a look, referring back to our trauma non-negotiables of one is staff wellness. Every school has to be really intentional about how we're supporting our staff members. So our partners have really been incredible in helping us expand that work. From 2018 to 2020, we matched about 88 of our schools with an additional mental health partner. This school year, and we're in this process right now, marks year 4 of the mental health expansion. And so all of the remaining DC public and DC public charter schools will receive a full-time mental health licensed clinician this school year. This is a really big deal. This is a really big deal for the city. DC has more mental health professionals to serve students than any other state. And this army, like Nigel said, this army of ours is ready to support every student no matter the need. So what we really want to emphasize to you all as parents and caregivers is that we don't want you to hesitate. If you think that your student, your child, they have a mild concern, but it's not that big of a deal, that we're here, we're ready. We talked about how we provide supports to students on all tiers. So if you have a referral for your student, it doesn't necessarily mean they even need therapy, but they need something. They need the team to talk about how that child can be supported for their unique need. So we want to emphasize that we have an arsenal, we have an army, we have people at the ready, we have, Nigel said, including our partners, over 600 mental health professionals across all of our 117 schools. Next slide, please. So how do we get there? We're excited to share that we've made it, hopefully, easy for you all to access these services no matter which schools your children are attending. Last year, we introduced this universal referral process that allows students to access all mental health supports using just one form. The form is on our DCPS website on the school mental health page, and you can also access it using some of our social media that we'll talk about at the end. So you submit the form to your school's school behavioral health coordinator. There's a coordinator identified, at least one coordinator identified at all of our buildings. Typically the school social worker, but could also be a dean or a school leader. No matter who you give the referral to or speak to, they know the process, they're familiar with the process, and they can get it into the right hands. So we don't want to create extra barriers if you're not sure who that coordinator is in your building. So then the school mental health team would come together, they would review that referral and link your child to the best clinician on the team to meet the needs of that student. Maybe they're already running a group for students who have lost someone during the pandemic. Maybe they're putting together a group for students who have experienced mild anxiety because of the academic or just because of academic rigor. So they would talk about the referral and make a plan of support for that unique needs of that child. And after that process, the behavioral health coordinator or a member of that team would reach out to you as the parent within 10 days to say, hey, we met as a team, this is what we have in mind, what do you think? Because we really need you and want you to be partners in this process with us. Next slide, please. Great, so we've provided the links to all of our resources here. Those first two links take you right to our school mental health site on the DCPS webpage for the referral forms. There's one referral for an adult to make, so you as a parent or caregiver, a teacher could use that, a staff member could use that. We also have a version for student self-referral, so really our secondary school age students, they have the ability to refer themselves. The next link down will take you to our school mental health webpage, and the final links there will take you to our Instagram and our Facebook pages. Next slide, please. So like I said earlier, we really work closely with the Department of Behavioral Health, making sure that we're collaborating and coordinating our efforts to support our families across the city. They work with several organizations within the mental health expansion and also those not part of expansion that you can access as a parent by contacting the Access Helpline, and the information is here for you and also on the DBH website. Parents could use that as a resource if you just want to talk to a clinician about if you need immediate support for coping strategies, if there is a crisis that needs to be addressed, or if you just really need help addressing family stressors. That is a resource available to you. The clinician that you speak with through the Access Helpline can also connect you to individualized longer-term support if that's something you request. And then finally, on the bottom corner there, throughout the pandemic, the Department of Behavioral Health has been hosting Wellness Wednesdays, which is an online parent support group opportunity. This is an opportunity for parents, for you all to just take care of yourselves, to talk to other parents, to share stories, to share moments, to share resources with one another, to ask questions. They're hosted by school-based clinicians or early childhood specialists. So really to ask, how can I really help foster resiliency in my kids during this time? And also, how can I take care of myself at the same time? Wellness Wednesdays occur every week. There's a different topic, and the information is all posted on the DBH website, dbh.dc.gov. They take place every Wednesday via WebEx from 5:30 to 6:30, and their sessions are available in both English and in Spanish. And again, the DBH website is dbh.dc.gov. Nigel?
All right. Thank you, Carla. So this is a last-minute addition, and we were not able to get this particular slide translated into Spanish in time because I slid it in at the last second. So I want to cover this slide both in Spanish and English. So, por favor, no te rías de mi español, ¿ok? Mi colega me pidió que mencionara el cumplimiento de la inmunización en esta presentación. El equipo de salud escolar verificará periódicamente el estado de cumplimiento de las vacunas antes de que los estudiantes regresen al edificio. Todos los estudiantes deben estar al día con sus vacunas infantiles. El cumplimiento de los requisitos de vacunación infantil de rutina es fundamental para prevenir una epidemia epidemia en medio de la pandemia de COVID-19. So what I said was that I was asked by my colleagues to mention this immunization enforcement because it's very important for what we're trying to do as we go into the school year. The school health team will regularly check immunization compliance status before students return to the building. All students must be up to date with their childhood immunizations. Enforcement of routine childhood immunization requirements is critical in order to prevent an epidemic in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, so I am going to raise some questions for our presenters to answer live. Nigel, I'm going to start with you, and we've gotten a couple of different iterations of this question, both from the RSVP form and also live in this event. But we know that our families have been and continue to be impacted by a lot of trauma as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And kids really pick up on that trauma in the atmosphere. They pick up on the stress in the adults in their life. So what would you say to parents who want to address their child's anxiety about returning to school in the midst of, another wave of COVID and worries that they may have about themselves or about their family members and their health?
Sure. Now, it's a very important question, and I appreciate it for being raised. One of the things that we strongly encourage is for you to become very deliberate about your routines. Routine is a very familiar word, but I think being deliberate about your routines is very, very important, particularly when you pick up on there being a lot of anxiety. So what time do you wake up in the morning? What time do you plan on leaving the house? What time do you come home? If these things are discussed beforehand, it does give your child a sense of control over their environment and their space. I mentioned this earlier, but giving your child some things that they can control during the school day, however small and however slight, but giving them particular things that they can control is also important for helping them find sending calm messages to their brain. So you have the routines and you have the messaging that can help send those calming thoughts and those calming messages to your brain. Another thing that I think is really important here is as parents, and as a parent myself, my wife and I have 5 children, and when they were a lot younger, we thought that if we do this and we do that and we do this, that it will produce a particular outcome, and those of you with older children know that that's a lie we tell ourselves, because you can't guarantee any particular outcome. We do our best. And in that being said, as parents, we often tell our children what we want them to do, how we want them to think, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. But much more often, children will follow the example that we set for them. So the strategies that I mentioned earlier, the strategies of creating routines, the strategies of those relationships and the resilience and building it through gratitude. Maybe you could try a gratitude journal. Through hope, maybe build in something where you're always looking forward to something in the future. These are strategies that you can apply as parents if you're not already, and I'm certain many of you already are. But if your children see you modeling particular behaviors, it won't be as foreign to them. And that cuts both ways, right? So if they see you engaging in deliberate routines, then they may be more likely to engage in deliberate routines. Also, if you're feeling particularly anxious, you can acknowledge it. You don't have to pretend that you never experience anxiety. Because if you do that and you pretend like it's bad or it's something that you never experience and your child experiences it, they may look at themselves and say, there's something wrong with me because I'm not like my dad or I'm not like my mom. But so you can acknowledge it in front of your child. Hey, this is a very real concern and we don't have a readily available answer. And then you can apply the techniques. And when your child sees you acknowledging and then applying deliberate techniques, your child may acknowledge it and apply deliberate techniques. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nigel. That was great. One follow-up question that we got in the chat is, can you share some examples of something that they can control during the school day? You know, teachers are, very much, in control of the classroom environment. And like you mentioned this year, there's even more kind of protocols and rules than normal. So what are some examples of things that they can control during the school day?
Okay, excellent question. I can give you a few to start, but I think the important part is when your child comes home from that first day, engaging in that conversation and developing that together, and maybe even letting your child lead that on, okay, if we ask them, well, what things do you think you can control during the day? Give me 2 of them. Maybe washing your hands a certain number of times, once or twice before lunch and once or twice after lunch. I will make sure that when I'm in class that there will not be anybody within 6 feet of me, and I can control my personal space. I can control how many times I wash my hands. I mean, those are 2 smaller examples, but I think after you start that first day, and maybe you start just day 1 with those 2, but then when the child comes home, you can engage in that conversation, and then you can collectively develop a 3rd and a 4th thing that they may be able to control.
Thanks, Nigel. I'm going to take you off the hot seat here and turn it to Carla for a couple minutes. Carla, we got a couple questions about what support teachers have gotten in implementing some of the specific mental health support strategies that you guys have talked about, and if teachers have been, received training, professional development, tools that they can use to help support students as they return.
Sure. So again, not just in response to the pandemic, but before this, we had really emphasized the importance of social emotional learning and invested in social emotional learning curriculum and programming and things that were bigger than just here's this curriculum that we're learning in the classroom that teachers are delivering on emotion regulation or anger management. But that is all really what led to the development of those 5 non-negotiables. And the TRS model was turned into a learning series for all of our staff across the district last school year. So they received PD, professional development for those trauma responsive non-negotiables, and specifically to say, okay, this is how this looks. This is how we can support you in doing this. This is how we can provide coaching. This is what it might look like in the classroom for you. And those professional developments were co-led by an instructional leader and a mental health professional from the mental health team. On the other side of that, for the support that they receive themselves, like I said, we're really always working with our mental health teams, our leadership teams, and our partners to develop really consistent plans for staff wellness, because we can't just help prepare them for what they have to respond to, but how do we help prepare them to be resilient and take care of themselves? I know it's cliche, but we have to remind them you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to, when you show up in front of children, you have to be well yourself. And we can't just say, okay, we have an employee assistance program, call them if you need it. We can't just say, like I said before, we're going to have a wellness day once a year to focus on supporting yourself as staff member in a school, but we really have to be intentional about how we're supporting our staff. So we have provided professional development on the non-negotiables and that learning series and how to support students in the classroom, but also have supported staff and around staff wellness. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Carla. One more question for you. So for our parents who may be struggling themselves with their mental health, especially around the start of school, do you have recommendations for resources in DC and the community for families, in addition to what we offer at schools for students?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. I'm really, really glad that came up, because as part of the mental health expansion, I think folks had questions across the city. This question came up of why is the mayor, why is the city funding community-based organizations to place a clinician in the building and not just giving the schools extra money to hire another social worker or school counselor. The reason that that model was selected was because these organizations represent something bigger than a clinician in the building. They represent an organization in our communities that supports wraparound services for families. So family therapy, individual adult support, substance abuse, housing, case management, so many other opportunities and resources that we can connect to through these organizations. So one thing that I would really highly recommend on our website, there's the document that we had in one of the slides. It was called Here for You. It explains all of the mental health resources in our buildings, but in the back of that document, there's a full list by school of what type of DCPS mental health professionals are in each building and our mental health partners. So you can see if you or your family members need support, you can still connect to those organizations through your child's school. They are able to support not the clinician in the building, but you would then be much more easily connected to the broader resources of that organization. Those are all available to all of our families.
Thanks, Carla. I was just trying to find that link real quick to the Here for You document, which I found. So I'm going to drop that in the chat in case families want to access that now.
I will say, caveat, that came out at the beginning of last school year. We're in the process of updating the list. It's not too different, but you'll notice where there's a school that is currently being matched with a partner, it says future expansion partner or future expansion match. But in the next several weeks, 100% of our schools will have a match. So 88 already do, and you'll see an organization listed there. And in the next 2 weeks, I would say 3 weeks, we will have an updated version on the website of the specific partners in all of our buildings and our own mental health staff by building. So you know specific to your child's school, who the mental health staff are, what is available to them, and those organizations that are available to you. I would also just want to reiterate the Wellness Wednesdays. Those have been really powerful through the Department of Behavioral Health. They've had really good topics that are really impacting families and really true for families. And so I would also recommend giving that a try.
Great, thanks, Carla. We're gonna move through to kind of wrap up the presentation here, but I really encourage folks to continue to put their questions in the Q&A so that we can continue to respond to them.
Here's the contact information for some of the leadership of our school mental health team, and you can feel free to email me here, nigel.jackson3@k12.dc.gov, and I'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction to make sure that you get the specific resources that you need, or maybe a particular answer to a question. I know in these formats, sometimes, we have individual questions, and with the robust group that we've assembled in school mental health, I will make sure that you get the specific person that can answer your specific question, at your child's school, or any of the many people who work at your child's school who can get you the answers you're looking for. So please feel free to email me your individual questions, and I'll respond to each of them as best I can.
All right, so I'm going to take us through the conclusion here. Thank you so much to Nigel and Carla for sharing all that great information. I think we might have one more piece for you guys to wrap it up at the end, but I just want to make sure that that I thank you for your time and for the thoughtfulness that went into what you shared. So this is the last Parent University in our Recover Strong series. You can watch previous sessions on YouTube. I'm going to include that link in the next slide, but we want to just let you know we'll have our fall calendar up soon, and we'll be sharing that out on social media, and you can check our Eventbrite page for upcoming sessions as well. Like I said, this workshop will be on YouTube by probably Monday. The link here, bit.ly/DCPS Parent U recordings, is where you can find the recording of this session, and then our general what can families expect for the 21-22 school year session, and the learning acceleration session that was earlier this week. So those are all up on YouTube in Spanish and English. And then a few final things. So like I said, new information is being updated on the Reopen Strong website. So we dropped the link to the specific page where that information can be found in the chat earlier, but want to reiterate it here as well. We're also just wrapping up a survey of DCPS families specifically around how parents and families want to be engaged moving forward into this year, and we're using that survey to determine how we engage, what kind of Parent University content we offer, what mode works best for our families. So please take a moment to fill that out. And then for questions, feedback, ideas about this Parent University or any other Parent University sessions, you can email parentu@k12.dc.gov.
I'm going to read a quote here for an optimistic close. A deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we were meant to. Brene Brown.